At the end of high school, I learned what a feminist was. I had the privilege of going to a prestigious all-girls school, and my senior year, each of my classmates and I were tasked with selecting the name of a significant woman from American history and performing a first-person monologue about her life. The options included women like Sojourner Truth, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and yours truly got Tracy Chapman. I'll let the image of me speaking as Tracy Chapman sink in for a moment. Although this was half my lifetime ago, I have to admit that at the time, I was crushed. I had no idea who Tracy Chapman was, and when I learned that she was a folk singer, songwriter, and social activist, I wasn't any more excited. And not just because I was terrified of the racial implications of telling the story of a woman of color. I wanted somebody who was more of a card-carrying feminist, who used words like patriarchy and oppression unapologetically. I wanted to step into the shoes and tell the story of someone who could help me make sense of the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child, who could help me see that my experience didn't exist in isolation. I didn't intend on majoring in women's studies in college, nor did I intend on pursuing graduate work in the area or teaching women's studies for a number of years as an adjunct professor. But my freshman year, I somewhat stumbled into a women's studies classroom, and I just kept coming back. It made so much sense. During my 20s, I was engaged in social justice work, from starting a nonprofit girls leadership development organization to leading professional development in the arts for urban educators. I sought to do work that let me live my values. And as I took increasing ownership of the many privileges afforded to me because of my race and class and sexual orientation and gender identity and education, I started to see injustice everywhere. And it made me really angry, and at the same time, I felt ill-equipped to affect real change in the world. During this time, I also harbored a nasty secret. I was engaged in some wicked hate speech with myself. My self-talk was so nasty that it would make insert the name of your favorite raunchy comedian, well, it would make him or her blush. So, in pursuit of more self-love, I started working with a coach. And a few months later, I trained and I became one myself. My professors, my colleagues, my friends, they did not understand how I would trade in theory and activism for what they saw as woo. I didn't really understand myself. I just knew that when my partner asked what I saw as a rhetorical question, will you marry me? I could answer his question, but I couldn't answer what, in my opinion, was a much more pressing question that I needed to answer. Who did I want to be by the time I said I do? I was sick and tired of feeling so insecure, so angry, like such a phony baloney in my own life. The most basic definition of feminism is that you believe there should be political, social, and economic equality, irrespective of sex and gender. Well, we know that from recent research from the Washington Post and the Kaiser Family Foundation that 6 in 10 American women self-identify as feminists, and approximately 1/3 of men do as well. However, approximately 4 in 10 Americans see the feminist movement as angry. And what I know from my last decade as a women's leadership and public speaking coach is that yes, we can re-socialize people to see feminism as a positive movement to address gender inequality, a positive movement to liberate all of us from antiquated gender roles. Many of the women who self-identify as feminists are struggling profoundly in their personal and professional lives, like I was. and they're turning to some form of self-improvement to heal, to recalibrate, to reclaim their power and heighten their influence. And this, it makes sense. In the United States, we are told that women still earn 80 cents to the dollar that men make for equal work. However, that doesn't really tell us the full story. For women of color, the situation is considerably less rosy. Latino women, for example, earn 54 cents to the dollar that white men make. The Women's March on Washington, the day after the 2017 presidential inauguration, was the largest single-day demonstration in US history. Approximately 4 million people participated, what breaks down to between 1 and 1.5% of the US population. However, it's one thing to go to a march or a protest or to broadcast your views and tell your story in an angry or empowering social media post. It's an altogether different thing to believe that you possess the power and the ability to call out sexual harassment or racism within your organization, or leave a relationship that's toxic if your partner is the primary breadwinner and you have young children at home. Despite these realities, feminism and feminists often don't have kind words for the self-improvement industry. A simple online search of the words feminism and self-help brings up many critiques of the latter. For example, self-help books present generalized advice that asks women to conform to established social norms. To the more scathing, if feminism was about women's confidence, it would be no different than narcissism. You may be asking, why should we seek to empower ourselves when in the US, not to mention the vast majority of the world, there is so much injustice that has to be addressed? Isn't self-help depoliticizing feminism? If we want more women to speak up and out on behalf of themselves and the many issues and causes that require our championship, we must address the reality that too many women, irrespective of our privilege, have wretched self-confidence, are not comfortable standing in the spotlight, presenting our ideas, negotiating our worth, creating boundaries, challenging the status quo. And the feminism that I have studied and taught, it can explain why, as women, we're struggling in these areas due to sexism and a precarious process of socialization that begins the moment it's determined that we are female. Yet, it has failed to provide a pathway for individual women to reclaim our power. It is time for a new paradigm for feminism. The word paradigm comes from the Greek word paradigma, which means to show side by side. A new paradigm for feminism addresses feminist goals and individual women's empowerment. A new paradigm for feminism puts into practice the old feminist mantra that the personal is political. A new paradigm for feminism, it moves beyond how-to books and women's conferences and women's mentorship programs, which, while there's nothing wrong with those, rarely have lasting impact on women's self-confidence. Rather, a new paradigm for feminism recognizes the value of experiential women's empowerment programs that give women the opportunity to get up on their feet, to practice and refine and buff up their inner and outer leadership muscles, and develop their sense of worthiness to go out into the world and make massive positive impact. For when women can walk into any room, onto any stage, and speak with what I like to call moxie, they're more likely to advocate for themselves and on behalf of others. They're more likely to step into senior leadership and board roles, start companies, build movements, and hold public office. And perhaps most importantly, use their influence to reshape power structures and policies and practices that are hurting all of us. By the time I gave my history class monologue, my senior year, I realized I had been wrong. For by this point, I had a deep, deep, deep love for Tracy Chapman. I listened to her lyrics over and over and over again, and I like to think that they worked their way into my soul, imprinted on my cells. In one of her songs, Chapman sings, and I won't sing, but I will state, I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling that I could be someone, be someone, be someone. I wanted that for myself, even if for years it felt aspirational. Shortly after I gave my monologue, I graduated from high school, and Melinda French Gates was my high school graduation speaker. She would go on to say that a woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman. But the search to find that voice can be remarkably difficult. That has certainly been the case for me. I would bet that that has been the case for many of you, for most women around the world. Let's stop pitting self-help against feminism. Let's address oppression and empowerment together. And let's come together. And let's speak honestly, openly, bravely, compassionately about why so many women, even those of us who've had a lot of privilege, why we're struggling. And let's be really, really honest that it's not just because of sexism or racism or any other ism. As a feminist, I want to use my power and at times what feels like suffocating privilege to create opportunities for women. And I know that at least here in the United States, one of the most tangible ways that I can do that is by leading women's empowerment programs that give women the opportunity to step into the fullest expression of their leadership, to feel like they belong, and to know without a shadow of a doubt that we can be someone, the most authentic, vulnerable, tender, fierce version of ourselves, so that we can go out into the world and leave the legacy that we were put here to make. Will you all please join me in creating a new, more expansive paradigm for feminism? Thank you.